Production funding for American Grown, provided by James G. Parker Insurance, protecting agribusiness in the Valley for over 40 years. Brandt Professional Agriculture, discovering, manufacturing, and supplying the ag inputs that support the heroes that work hard to feed a hungry world every day. By Unwired Broadband, today's internet for rural Central California, keeping Valley Ag connected since 2003. By Hodges Electric, trusted by builders to wire thousands of Valley homes, now bringing that trust direct to you. By Wawona Frozen Foods, fruit as it should be, family owned since 1963. By Harris Farms, a legacy of growing. By Harris & Co., providing family farms insight to make the best possible financial decisions. And by Valley Air Conditioning and Repair, family owned for over 50 years, dedicated to supporting Valley agriculture and families that grow food for the nation. Five years later, the scars of the Creek Fire are still visible. And for many who live in the mountains of eastern Fresno and Madera counties, the memories remain just as raw. The fire changed lives, landscapes, and an entire way of thinking about risk in the forest. In part one, we asked a difficult question. What did we learn? And more importantly, did anything actually change? We saw progress in the air. CAL FIRE expanded its response capability, adding larger, more powerful aircraft like the C-130. We also looked at new firefighting technologies being used around the world, innovations that could reshape how we battle wildfire here at home. But fighting fire after it starts is only part of the story. The bigger challenge and harder work happens long before the first spark. Forest management, thinning overcrowded trees, removing dangerous fuels, restoring healthier, more resilient landscapes. It's slow, it's expensive, and it's often misunderstood because much of this work doesn't make the headlines. Today, that work is expanding. Foresters, arborists, contractors, and local crews are working the ground every day, cutting, chipping, burning, and clearing. New strategies are also taking root, including targeted grazing, with goats and cattle helping maintain areas that have already been treated, keeping fuels from building back up. At the same time, the people who lived through the Creek Fire are still here, rebuilding, adapting, and watching closely to see what changes and what doesn't. The reality is, much of the progress happening in our forests goes quietly unnoticed. Federal agencies, local fire safe councils, and nonprofit partners are making gains, but with limited resources and little time to tell their story. 5 years after the Creek Fire, the work is far from finished, but there are signs of progress. And there are quiet soldiers in this fight, making a difference 1 acre at a time.
What's going on over here?
Well, where they burn all those piles and they're half burnt, and now that wood's even more vulnerable to fire because it's dried out, and I think it's all over on there though. Well, here's some remnants of a burn. When the Creek Fire started, I was up at my cabin, Arnold Meadow, replacing the batteries, and then after that, I took a good friend up to Jones' store for a burger and a beer. And when I came home, my wife said there's a fire up there. I said, no, that fire is way down in Jose Basin. I did hear there was a fire going, but it was miles and miles away. But she goes, no, it's right in Mammoth Pool. And so I grabbed my gear and went back up there. And sure enough, it moved very fast. Never seen a fire behavior like that in my life. And I've been around fire for 20 years, so.
Division Romeo on command.
Nobody was up there. It was me and a fire hose, pulled about 500 feet of 1 inch that I had around my cabin on a hose reel, hosed everything down, and told this one old boy, he said he's staying, Lenny Barker. And I said, no, we're leaving. So I was the last one there. We opened up the gates, turned the pumps on, and away we went.
And so you had to be thinking, oh man, my place isn't going to make it, as you were following
I put my arms around and gave a kiss in the corner and said, it's time to go. So took a lot of pictures on the way out and went up to the summit, and that's when they were starting to bring some strike teams up. About the third day, one of the battalion chiefs from up here, he went to my cabin from CAL FIRE and he said, hey, I'm at your cabin. I said, oh man. He goes, it's still there. And I go, you kidding me? He goes, yeah, we're using your 1-inch fire hose you pulled and hosed everything down. So I did pretty much clearing on the whole property, park-like, trimmed all the bushes, raked, groomed. So the fire actually went right around my cabin like a laser beam. I got pictures and documents on that, and it was amazing. But unfortunately, a lot of other people lost their cabins that they've had up there for years.
The organization that I'm running, I'm the executive director of Eastern Madera County Fire Safe Council, and we are a private nonprofit organization. So we do projects on both forested land in state responsibility area, private land, and what we're doing here regionally is we're trying to build like a comprehensive community protection plan. And what that consists of is, you know, when you're looking at wildfire risk and within a community, you have to look at the entire scope of what the problems are and how to address them, which would be regional fuel breaks, shaded fuel breaks to protect the community through buffers, and then get inside and work from the inside out at the parcel level.
So when you have a disastrous fire like the creek fire come in with very high flame rates, right, intensity, that's going to pretty much wipe out everything across the board, right? It's almost like you're clear cutting the entire forest. So it's more than just trees getting wiped out. It's habitat for animals, plants, and, you know, actual beneficial species such as elderberry and flowers and things like that. So that actually will, in return, cause changes to the water table and our typical watersheds that we're used to, because the rate of infiltration into the soil is going to be a lot different with less vegetation in there.
So we don't work specifically through grants provided through pass-through organizations, although that's sometimes what we do, but we work directly with the state and with the federal government and through larger organizations like Sierra Nevada Conservancy to private funders like PG&E, all that have the same goal of wildfire mitigation and reducing risk. They use us as the pass-through to get the project onto the ground.
Forest management in the Sierra isn't one system. It's a checkerboard. State lands, federal lands, and thousands of acres of private property, scattered pieces that often sit at the gateway to the larger forests beyond. Much of that private land is held by families, small landowners, or utility companies. Properties that may span hundreds of acres, land that plays a critical role in slowing fire before it reaches communities, or before it moves into state lands or federal forests. But many landowners don't have the resources, the equipment, or the technical knowledge to manage it. And that's where organizations like the Eastern Madera County Fire Safe Council come in. Working often in the private land space, they help design and carry out large-scale fuel reduction projects, often with funding support from partners like PG&E and state grant programs. But even here, nothing moves quickly. Every project, public or private, must navigate layers of planning, permitting, environmental review, and approvals, paperwork, compliance, coordination across agencies. The process can take 2, sometimes 3 years before a single tree is thinned or a single acre is treated. We are facing an emergency when it comes to wildfire risk and forest fuels. But the system designed to protect the landscape often moves at anything but emergency speed. So leaders like Ashley and her team have learned to work ahead of the system. They identify high-risk areas years in advance. They build detailed treatment plans. They line up partners and priorities, so when funding becomes available, they're not starting from scratch. One of those ready-to-go projects lies just above Bass Lake, along a critical corridor that leads into the high country and the surrounding Sierra National Forest. Here, on mixed private land, partnerships and preparation come together to move a major fuel reduction effort from paper to the ground. And in today's Sierra, that kind of readiness can make all the difference.
A lot of people, when we're talking about wildfire, assume that there's money available through the state, let's go implement a project, let's clean up the forest, when essentially that would be a state responsibility area response to a federal problem, and that's not the way we operate. The state of California, for example, has no sort of authority over federal lands. Although we do subsidize projects by funneling money to assist with projects on federal land, we do not have the authority to create this change that we know is needed through the state. So the feds organize and respond and implement projects through a federal authority process. The state has different processes. There is overlap, and if you're using state funding to implement a project on federal land, you're going to have to follow environmental regulations for not just the state, but also for the federals. There's many, many layers from the process of identifying a need to understanding how to address that need with, say, pre-fire mitigation. And then from that point, you've got maybe a beautiful project built out. You know where you want to place it. Then you're walking into like, okay, let's figure out how we're going to get this funded. Let's figure out what environmental background work needs to be done. That comes first before the actual project funding. And at that point, you have deadlines. And all funding for projects is competitive and it's targeted. So saying that there's a pool, say, for Prop 4 or CCI grants in the state of California to do fuel work, it does not mean you get fuel work and then you place that fuel work wherever you like. That funding pots, they're targeted. So some will go towards reforestation, some will go towards watersheds, some will go towards WUI, which is Wildland Urban Interface Protection Plans. So you have to have projects developed that are responsive to the funding that is available.
You know, it takes a village really for these projects to get done, right? We wouldn't be able to know where a lot of the priority regions are without working with our collaborators at CAL FIRE for our region, for Merced, Madera, Mariposa Union. And we have been astounded and very thankful for our partnership with the fuels management team at PG&E for their willingness to actually create projects in our region for fire safety. Of course, we have connections with the Sierra Nevada Conservancy as well. We've got projects in the pipeline through them, through CAL FIRE, and of course our local regional nonprofits, the Yosemite Sequoia Resource Conservation Development District, Coarse Gold RCD, Yosemite Gateway Prescribed Burn Association. It's through all of those partnerships that we have with local organizations and stakeholder organizations that allows us, through our Fire Adapted Madera County Collaborative, to actually figure out the most direct way to implement fuel reduction projects across the county as a whole. And it really takes a village to get stuff like this done.
Well, Edison Land, most of the activity has taken place. They did all the salvage logging right away. I think harvested almost 80 million board feet off of the area that had been burned, cleaning it up and getting it ready to plant. Now, on the other hand, the Forest Service has an entire different process. They have to do a tremendous amount of work preparing the ground for plantations. So of the 800,000 or 400,000 acres on National Forest, just a few, relatively few acres are being managed. They haven't even taken care of all the tremendous erosion because the fire damaged the soils, and so there was a tremendous amount of erosion. They said about $80 million in erosion, so there's many roads are still not fixed around the Sierra National Forest.
just up Bayshore Road from the fuel reduction treatment recently completed by the Eastern Madera County Fire Safe Council, another fuel break project has been partially conducted by the Sierra National Forest. The contrast between the two treatments is stark. Ashley and Kevin's work is clean, tight, and looks purposely manicured. The Forest Service job looks different than that. Less of a park-like setting and more of a utilitarian approach.
All right, so Steve, we're up on Bayshore Road right now, and this is the Forest Service section. Their fuels reduction project that they did, and I think this is what pisses everybody off, are the piles that are left here.
These are big piles right here. And we're within a quarter mile from the township of Bass Lake. One of these piles goes up, is gonna go bing, bang, boom, and take them all out and go right into Bass Lake.
Well, I mean, when you look at, let's take a little walk and look at what they did here. So what they've done is they've gone in here and cleared a lot of the ladder fuels and a lot of the ground.
Which is good.
Which is good, you need that done. But then what happens, and I think this is what's puzzling for a lot of people, is they pile this stuff up and it sits here for, how long has this stuff been here? Like almost a year now.
Over a year, yeah. You know what? If you start a project, finish it. And this is what you get. I mean, we wanted this, and it's an unfinished job. Finish it up. You start it, finish it from start to finish, and be done with it. Everybody loves the Forest Service if they did their job properly. They're here to manage the forest. And I don't see it being managed right now the way I would manage it if I was in charge. You know, things change, technology, you know, better equipment. They just need to pay attention to the people that are telling them what to do. They don't want to do that because they're the boss and they're gonna do it their way.
Oh, when you see this patch this size, Steve, what are you thinking here? This is a pretty good pile.
It's a good pile. I do a lot of burning around my property. If this goes off, you're gonna see it from outer space. I guarantee you. And then it'll go from that one, to that big pile, to these dead trees, to that dead snag. And you'll be on national news. And we don't want that around Bass Lake, believe it or not.
We drive this road all the time in the summertime, all seasons of the year, really.
Yeah.
And you know, when I first saw this project being done, I was like, heck yeah, man, this is cool. Because
I was excited too, Jeff.
They're all excited. And the biggest thing that we are as cabin owners, and even if you don't own a cabin, even if you love coming to the High Sierra, you love going to Jones's store for a burger, or you love going to Chiquito Creek, or you like going to Jackass Meadow, or you want to go to the Ansel Adams Wilderness up on top. When you see this is a good sign, because the thing that's going to start a fire on this corridor, this Bayshore Road corridor, is going to be someone stupid that down at Bass Lake. And it's going to be someone not from Bass Lake being stupid at Bass Lake that's going to start a fire. The summer winds go right up this canyon, and so this will slow fire down. But as Steve said a minute ago, finish the job, or at least maybe tell us why you can't finish the job.
Well, Jeff, the biggest thing here too, is we're all up there. This is our egress road out of our cabin. This is the only road getting out of there.
Yeah.
And this is going to stop our egress from if there was a fire.
I guess what it comes down to is like communication. Like, you know, we live here, and I think the Forest Service sometimes forget they work for us. They forget
Absolutely.
that. They forget that they are servants to us.
The taxpayers.
The taxpayers. That's it. There's no other interpretation for that. And we get along great with the Forest Service people that we know up here, but when it comes to a project like this, maybe were you notified as a Bass Lake homeowner that this was going on?
No.
Was there any communication between the Forest Service and the people?
I've talked to old supervisors of our county, and they said, oh, they'll get to it. Well, when? You know, like my grandfather said, you start something, finish it, or don't start it at all.
100%. But just giving people a heads up as to, hey, folks, we cleaned up, we did this project, here's our plan. The piles you're going to see for X amount of time. We're working our best to get more funding to do, or whatever it is.
This project is dead in the water. I don't see it happening.
And if
Not
it's
this year.
And if it's environmental lawsuits that are blocking the finishing of this job, tell us that too. just start telling us. On the flip side of that, there's a lot more to all of this than you and I know, and I get that, and that's part of the problem. That's part of my point is, well, let us know so we can be on your side with this.
What's the most important thing on any fire if you're a fireman? Communicate. Make sure your orders are clear and understood. And there's nothing clear and nothing's understood around here. It's just a mess. It needs to be cleaned up.
After part 1 of this special was produced, I again reached out to Sierra National Forest Supervisor Dean Gould for an interview on this fire break project, and more generally, to learn what the Sierra was doing differently after the creek fire regarding forest management. This time, Mr. Gould wrote me back, but stated that all questions of him would have to be submitted in writing ahead of time and would need to be pre-approved by the USDA. American Grown did not agree to these conditions for this episode.
So regionally, we haven't used a lot of grazing. But what grazing does is it's a maintenance, maintenance piece of the puzzle. How to keep fuels down year round. We're actually developing a grazing protocol for Eastern Madera County that can be used on private lands and on the SRA, and if need be, move it into forest land. When you're doing grazing, it is species specific for targeted outcomes. So you wouldn't get in here with some grazers and expect to have ladder fuels removed. You need browsers for that. So it's very species specific. So what we're trying to do is develop the model for the profiles of the fuel and what that targeted grazing looks like. So it's going to be different at different areas.
Are you talking about using different animals?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So what's a browser versus a grazer?
A browser would be a goat, something that likes to climb. It will eat almost anything it sees with very finite exceptions. They're happy to take down lots of ladder fuels. What browsers can do on a large landscape scale that we can't do with machine access, think about the slopes over there where the creek fire went in and out. You're not going to get machine equipment down there to do mitigation, but guess what? A goat's happy to crawl down there and get into your ladder fuels, eat them up. If you're talking about seasonal flashy fuels and keeping down that fine fuel, which is our grasses, which catch rapidly and they really spread wildfire into the canopy, keeping those down, that can be handled by the grazers. So that's a different species. So what we're trying to do is take all of these methodologies for prescribed herbivory and translate them into a way that we can actually put projects on the ground, very targeted projects on the ground that will hit different fuel models. So whether it's a grassy fine fuel or whether it's a chaparral type of environment or whether we're talking forested woodlands, we will have an answer to that with a targeted prescribed herbivory.
The forests have always been kind of managed anthropogenically, right, by humans, right? I mean, Native Americans for thousands of years living up there intentionally set meadows on fire because they knew that years later they would have blueberries in the meadow, that kind of stuff. So there's an argument to be made that it was never natural, right? At least as long as humans have been around. It's important to realize that it is all connected, right? In terms of sustainability, sustainability looks at managing people, planet, and profit, right? So in terms of jobs down in the valley that are maybe more ag-related, most certainly they would benefit from sustainable natural resource management practices up here, right? In terms of watershed healthiness, right? In terms of managing flood, runoff, sediment, erosion, all that stuff is all connected to basically the plants that are actually on the ground within the watershed. There's a couple of different schools of thought in terms of environmental management. There's, of course, the preservationist side, which kind of started with John Muir, and that is kind of the National Park Service's kind of thought process behind a lot of things. It's more preservationist. And then Gifford Pinchot, right, one of the first heads of the Forest Service, he was more about utilitarianism, right? What can the land do for us? How can we use it? And I think that the best forest management and natural resource management plans use a little bit of both, right? It's important to preserve said resources so my kids and their kids and their kids can have something there, right, to sustain themselves and have the fresh water, have the recreational resources. And of course, it's all connected, air quality, all of that, it's all connected to forest health. And the most successful land and environmental managers that I've worked with have been willing to learn from everything, right? And they're not just preserving, they're not just conserving, they're not just, using the forest for resources. It's a little bit of everything. But the research has shown from UCANR, from UC Davis, that for our specific forests and typical historic fire regime up here, that it is at an unhealthy level in terms of being stocked right now, and actually actively managing by intentionally removing fuels and doing intentional burning is one of the best ways to kind of restore the overall sustainability of the forest as a whole, I think. Yeah.
Production funding for American Grown, provided by James G. Parker Insurance, protecting agribusiness in the Valley for over 40 years. Brandt Professional Agriculture, discovering, manufacturing, and supplying the ag inputs that support the heroes that work hard to feed a hungry world every day. By Unwired Broadband, today's internet for rural Central California, keeping Valley Ag connected since 2003. By Hodges Electric, trusted by builders to wire thousands of Valley homes, now bringing that trust direct to you. By Wawona Frozen Foods, fruit as it should be, family owned since 1963. By Harris Farms, a legacy of growing. By Harris & Co., providing family farms insight to make the best possible financial decisions. And by Valley Air Conditioning and Repair, family owned for over 50 years, dedicated to supporting Valley agriculture and families that grow food for the nation.